we've talked about the Stop Killing Games petition. We've touched on all of that because it's been a hot button issue, sort of. I mean, it feels like everybody agrees on it except like 3 people. But having said that, there was a big group called Video Games Europe that responded to the petition after it hit 1 million signatures in the EU specifically. And they dropped this whole thing. And it's basically, you know, our position paper on why providing continued support do not work for all games. And they go through this, and there's some specific highlights, but basically it is a pretty sizable paper, you know, 4 or 5 pages, that goes through why they think it would be bad to go through with this and to do this. And what's funny is it echoes pretty much one-to-one a lot of Pirate Software's talking points. So for example, they randomly talk about like interactive entertainment, but they go down, let's see, player safety, reduced or no player protection. Requiring games to run on private servers would result in the inability for games companies to continue to protect players from illegal or harmful content or conduct, as their moderation and player safety teams would no longer be involved. Yeah, it's the risk reward of having that freedom to run the game yourself. People understand this. It's like, this isn't shocking. Okay. Increased security risks. Releasing game code or server binaries to facilitate the creation of private servers operated by players could expose game companies and consumers to bad actors, malware, data breaches, or DDoS attacks. Okay. Like I'd rather still own my products, and then you can figure out how to deal with the malware afterwards. Like, okay. Negative impact on investment in games, job growth, and consumer choice. Ensuring an online game can work without official server support requires significant investment of engineering resources, making it very costly for exercise for video games companies. Many of the costs game companies would incur in implementing an end-of-life plan would have to be incurred towards the end of the commercial life of the game, when it is no longer commercially viable to continue to support. Yeah, it's going to cost us money that we don't want to spend. Duh. Requirements to implement such plans could lead to less risk-taking, fewer investment projects in developing new games, and potentially fewer jobs. Ultimately, it could lead to increased costs for consumers and less choice. Again, this is something like a bajillion indie games do. I mentioned in my video on the Anthem thing, the Stronghold Crusader example. Stronghold Crusader is a game from like 25 years ago or something. Like, it's very old. And it still supports private like server stuff. Like, you can still connect directly to your buddy and play matches against each other. It's not a big deal, but that game is still alive because they opened it up like that. If it was always online, no, it'd be long dead and gone. Like, you just have to design the game with that as an option to allow people to play the game directly, like peer to peer. That's very doable. Like, you just design it that way. If you design it as always online and then you try to backtrack it, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be more of a headache. That's not my problem. And this petition specifically is asking basically if, like, say, a law were produced in the EU or regulation to require this, it would apply to games coming out after a set date. So it wouldn't necessarily retroactively apply to all of these other games. It wouldn't be like, okay, now you have to find a way to make WoW offline. They're not saying that. They're just saying now you have to have some sort of end-of-life plan when you stop supporting it so that it continues to be playable. Like, this really is not that crazy. It really isn't. But you start to see all this. This is where they really start to stretch it. Reputational harm. Allowing players to run private servers with online interaction possibilities could result in players using those games in ways that don't align with the game company's brand values. Yeah, for all you know, they might start using proximity chat. It might be toxic. Can you imagine? Leading to a negative association with a brand, thereby harming its reputation. Again, we're really stretching, fam. We're really stretching with this one. Like, do you really think people are like, oh, I'm gonna hop on Fortnite and play this only up like mini mode somebody made? It's not very good. Screw you, Epic. Like, no, maybe DSP is acting that way, but no one else is gonna be so dim-witted to misunderstand what's happening when it's like a private server versus an official server. Everybody understands this. Everybody gets it, you know? You take the risk, you roll the dice playing a private server, and, you know,
live with the consequences.
That's what happens. So I don't think that this is actually that big of a risk, but again, they're just kind of stretching. This is also where you start to see some really interesting things. Again, what I love about this article is that you can tell it's put out by people that represent the industry. And I'll show you just how much they represent the industry in just a second, because their board of directors is quite revealing. But they represent the industry, and you can start to see how, like, so much of this, it is pure just corpo nonsense. But listen to this. Okay. Impact on intellectual property rights. Erosion of intellectual property rights. Mandating game companies keep their online games operable post official support would undermine their rights and autonomy in deciding how their intellectual property is utilized. So requiring it to stay online would affect their ability to choose to not keep it online, which is technically true, I guess. Yes, that's technically true. I guess, we can't miss that point. But there is a vital interest in maintaining effective copyright protection, including protection against circumvention of technologies that control access to copyrighted video game software, where such circumvention is undertaken in circumstances that would lead to the unauthorized public exploitation of games. This is a lot of words to say very little. Competition from community-supported versions. This is also really, really funny. They're saying that they could be threatened by, like, a fan-made mode or fan server. Such a requirement could lead to community-supported versions of the game competing with official versions, potentially jeopardizing the financial investments of the video game companies. So if the fans make a private server or a private game mode or something that's better than the company made, that will hurt the company because they're not getting paid for it. Again, how is this our problem? Make a better game. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is it? It's crazy. Forfeiture of licensing and reproduction rights, allowing customers to create or run modified copies of online games, would necessitate games companies to either license additional rights or refrain from enforcing them, effectively leading to a forfeiture of control over these rights. This, as far as I can understand it, has to do with like trademark stuff, for example. So I've mentioned this before, but when you file a trademark for something, like somebody asked, are you going to trademark Luke Stevens or something, like your name? And I was like, yeah, I don't know why I would need to do that. But even if I did, like, let's say I had a more like branded name, like I went by Carpet Boy. I don't know.
Alex DeGents donated $10 through Super Chat. If you want some insane news, check the Star Citizen subreddit. Hackers are ruining entire servers. As
Really?
a player seeing it happen, it's bananas.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. That's crazy. Yeah, we can look that up. But what I was saying is, thank you for the 10. I'll look that up after this. But if I went by like Carpet Boy and they're like, hey, Luke, can you trademark Carpet Boy? I could, but then anytime anybody uses Carpet Boy, which now the more I say it, it sounds like a euphemism for something. I'm sorry. But anytime anybody used it, I would have to go have my lawyers try to take it down, because if I didn't try to enforce my trademark, I would lose it. I would forfeit it. It's why you can't like trademark the moon, because like you'd have to go, and they wouldn't grant it, first of all, but you'd have to go and enforce it. Anytime anybody tried to use the term the moon, you'd have to go after it. It's why, like, whenever we saw these lawsuits, like there was the one that was mentioned in that No Man's Sky video from Internet Historian, where I think it was was it Microsoft with like SkyDrive or something, some other company with SkyDrive. They tried to sue the No Man's Sky devs because it used the word sky, and they're like, SkyDrive, No Man's Sky, let's just shut it down. But it's because it was close enough that the lawyers had to go after it so that they wouldn't lose their potential trademark. They had to try and enforce it, even in cases where it's like a bit of a stretch, just to show that they're actively trying to enforce it. It's just something, it helps the lawyers. The lawyers always win, but that's how it kind of has to work. So maybe they're saying if they were to open this up and like you can play, I don't know, the Crew offline, the OG Crew offline, that they would then, because you're making your own version of the Crew and you're like, hey, download this new patch for the Crew, and you use their term, they're saying that they would have to not enforce their trademark stuff and their cease and desists and everything on you in that case, which could lead to them forfeiting their trademarks and IP protections and stuff, which maybe, or you just freaking change the EULA or something. Like, there's all sorts of things they could do. Again, with a lot of this, if they wanted to change it to make it work in a better way for consumers, they could. It's just that this is the way things are because they designed it this way, since it's best for them. And so now they're trying to take steps to make sure that they can protect their own, like, perspective on it. You know, they're advocating for their perspective of it. But then they go and they say like importance of consumer protection laws. So transparency, players must be given reasonable prior notice before any termination of access to the game. Yeah, we're going to shut it down in 6 months. Enjoy. Service duration. They say like, you know, the service aspects of online games be provided for a reasonable amount of time. The problem is reasonable is not defined. So Concord can be open for like 2 weeks and then they shut it down fully and refund everybody, which is how they kind of got away from it. But other games, they may support it for a year and then shut it down. They're like, yeah, that was reasonable. That was a reasonable lifespan for it, but it's not defined. They get to define what's reasonable.
Brendan Lucas donated £10 through Super Chat.
Thank you.
That was British Sky Broadcasting.
Sky Broadcasting.
If you thought the word Sky couldn't possibly be copyrighted, think again. Nothing in the UK can have the word Sky in the name, because this company sues hard.
Yeah, dude. IP protection laws are stupid. And you can tell they were designed by lawyers who are like, oh, every time anybody uses the word Sky, we get to do another lawsuit and get paid. Let's do it. Like, seriously, that's why they did it this way.
Fearless Wolf
The
donated
lawyers win.
£10 through Super Chat.
Thank you.
Luke, why did people turn on Thor? He's usually genuine and pro-dev. He supports preservation, just not forced server releases. Was this just Reddit drama or deeper frustration?
I mean, I'm sure everybody can speak to their specific frustration with it. My frustration with it is just this, like, narcissistic inability to like acknowledge someone else's perspective, or even when you're mistaken or wrong. Like, I'll tell you very, very jubilantly when I'm wrong. I was very wrong about Elden Ring Night Rain, for example. I was in my bubble. I did not think that game was going to pop off the way it did. I did not think there were that many people out there that were interested in that. I was in my bubble, and that it did phenomenally well. I was very wrong about that. And I've kind of reflected, tried to be like, why did I feel so strongly that there was just not that big of an audience for it? But, you know, that's what happens, is that you'll make mistakes and you need to adjust and figure it out. But I think why it kind of exploded the way that it did was because it wasn't just him offering an alternative opinion. Him with his platform, it basically, like, initially did a lot of damage to the Stop Killing Games petition and movement back however long ago that was, a year ago, 6 months ago, whatever it was, the first time he talked about it. But this next time that it came back up, people started looking at it and being like, maybe it was after like the World of Warcraft stuff and people were already kind of skeptical towards Pirate Software's perspectives. But they came back and were just like, no, I mean, you're starting to sound pretty hardcore like a corporate glazer. You know, it sounds like you're defending that, but you know, it's fine if he wants to take the perspective of a game dev and the industry perspective. That's fine. Like, what frustrates me with this stuff is when a company or somebody is taking the industry perspective, which is what this represents, and then they try to twist it like, well, you're just too stupid to understand this, or you're just naive. You know, this is actually really good for you. We're trying to protect you. This is for you. Like, don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining. I know damn well what you're doing. You're trying to protect your IP. You're trying to protect your monopoly, the way you've got things set up where you can make ridiculous amounts of money and then pull the plug whenever you see fit without having to offer refunds or anything else. Like, this is a system that's been built up by you for you. It was not built for me. I am just rolling with the punches, but this was set up by you, and for you to try to like lie to me and twist it as if this is actually like, this is for your own good, you stupid little boy. Sit down. Like that's what drives me crazy, because it's just it's kind of insulting. You know, what advocacy typically looks like, and what's, I think, fine, and why I'm totally fine with them putting out, you know, pieces like this, is that typically like the industry is over here, and then the like consumer perspective is over here, and then we meet somewhere in the middle.
404 donated $10 through Super Chat.
That's what should happen.
He did an interview with Healthy Gamer GG, who is a doctor, and he told him that he was super arrogant in the interview.
I did see that. Well, I didn't see the whole thing. I saw the clips where the guy is like, it's very arrogant to dismiss people's perspective. What do you say to people who are frustrated and call you like narcissistic for dismissing their perspectives? And he's like, I don't even think about them. I just cast them out. And he's like, you're literally doing it right now. It was honestly amazing. It was honestly amazing. All YouTubers, to a certain extent, like, we're all narcissists. We're all crazy. Like, you have to be a little crazy to sit in front of a camera in an empty room alone talking to yourself for hours on end. This whole thing, what's happening now, is weird. Let's just acknowledge that. But I think, you know, some people can get a bit of a head and kind of lose perspective on how it is weird. And it doesn't make you a genius. It doesn't make you brilliant. Like, it's kind of weird, and that's okay, you know? At a certain point, DRK says, that statement is very arrogant, and Thor replies, I don't think so. It's like, dude, you're doing the thing. You're doing the thing, man. Yeah, man. But like I was saying, this is how advocacy typically works. Like, one team represents the extreme. In this case, this is the industry. This is the paper we just looked at. And then the gamers represent this perspective, and they are, of course, going for the other extreme. They want full offline support. They want all of this. They want, you know, to be refunded if you're going to take the product they bought away from them. And so they represent the other extreme. And what typically happens is that you end up in the middle with something that has pieces that make the industry happy and pieces that make the consumer happy. That's how this typically works, you know? And so as long as the discourse starts, cool. That's the key. The problem is that, like, this whole thing, this perspective is being represented by the Stop Killing Games petition. And by trying to stomp this out, it's preventing even meeting in the middle. And one thing that, as I understood it, Thor was trying to say was, no, because this is the extreme, this is bad, and we shouldn't support the thing at all. And it's like, that's just not how consumer advocacy works. Like, you advocate for the thing that is most in your interest as a consumer, and most likely you'll end up giving away a couple things. You'll end up losing, you know, one or two of your bullet points, but that's okay, because you still ended up way further over towards your side than you started, because this is where we're starting now. This is where the industry is, because it's been set up by the gigacorps, you know? So I think it's, you know, the spirit of the petition may be deemed by industry guys as extreme, but it gets the conversation rolling. Like, when they are used to sitting comfortably in their ivory towers, the idea of having to support a game after it's not making money, or at least offer it as like offline, that is viewed by them as a very extreme position. They're like, no, we're going to shut it down and kill it and move on, and you're going to like it. To them, that's an extreme position. But it's extreme because they've built this whole thing up in their own image, the way that they want it, you know? Do I think that the desires and things outlined in the petition are that extreme? No, I don't. I don't think it's unreasonable to be like, yeah, when you buy something, you own it and you don't have to give it up just because the company decided they didn't want to deal with it anymore. I think you buy something, you should get to keep it, even when it's not officially supported. You should make it offline compatible. If you can take the extra step and make it so we can play like private server matches, that's awesome. But I don't think it's that extreme. What I'm saying is, from like the industry's perspective, it's crazy extreme. It's wild. But why would it be considered so wild? Well, who is Video Games Europe? I told you I'd show you who it is. Look at the board. Hester Woodliff is the chair from Warner Brothers Games. They also have a board member, Khalid Haddadi from Roblox, Cannon Pence from Epic Games, Kerry Hopkins from EA, Ian Mattingly from Activision, Kumar Yamil from Microsoft, Clemens Mayer Wigellen, I don't know, from Nintendo of Europe, Cinnamon Rogers, fantastic name, from Sony Interactive Entertainment, Matt Spencer from Take-Two, Elaine Correa from Ubisoft, Alberto Gonzalez Lorca from Bandai Namco, Corinne Parker from Square Enix, Mark Maslowicz from Level Infinite, Felix Falk from Game, Nicholas from Cell, David Verbruggen from VGFB, and Nick Poole from Yuki. They are not your friends. They are the friends of the industry. Okay? This is why they think this whole thing is so extreme. Because they represent the big boys. They represent the behemoths. So for them, it sounds crazy. And when you've worked for maybe a Blizzard or an Activision, it probably does sound crazy because you're used to the way things are and always have been, not necessarily always, but have been for a long time. But that doesn't mean that's the way things have to stay. That's my point, is just because right now everything is about leasing the games, you don't own anything, that's just how it works. That doesn't mean it has to be that way. Like, doesn't mean it has to stay that way. You can push for things to be better. It's okay. You can. It just takes, some effort, but it can happen. It can happen. But this whole thing has been very interesting to see. But I mean, whenever you start to see, what did they say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think for a lot of people, they're like, okay, so this whole stop killing games movement is hated by these people. So it's the enemy of my enemy. Sounds like it's my friend. And I think that's how a lot of people can interpret
donated
this.
£10 through Super Chat.
Thank you.
The two arguments I have heard against stop killing games I have remotely agreed WTIH is the security risks of P2P and how you codify such a change without setting completely unreasonable standards.
I think so getting into the specifics of it, like the nuance of actually what you would write in, say, a regulation or a law about it, I think that is where this debate would kind of settle somewhere in the middle. Most likely, it would not be like every game has to have a fully functional offline mode with fully functional offline progression. Most likely, that's not how it would go. Most likely, what would be negotiated and settled on would be something akin to like, you have to allow the game to be bootable offline, and you have to be able to, maybe there has to be a mode to play without an internet connection or without post-launch support and stuff, which could be like, the Mafia games where they have the free roam mode. It could be something as simple as that, where it's like, okay, offline mode for Concord would just be like the shooting range, the firing range. That could be the way you do it. I mean, it's just something as simple as that, where it's like, yeah, the game, you can boot into it and you can still navigate menus. You can go into the firing range and practice, but the game itself, there's no matches. Maybe they get to something like that where they negotiate it that way. My ideal would be, always have offline modes, allow private servers. Cause I like the idea of like, even if a game flopped, being able to go in 5 years and be like, hey, everybody in the Discord, let's hop on and play a round of Concord for old time's sake. That kind of sounds like a fun idea for preservation and everything. But realistically, I don't think that's what would happen. But the point is, you get the conversation started, and I think that's the key. Because once the conversation started, we can start moving towards a more pro-consumer position or a framing for the industry, as opposed to what it is now, which is just fully like in favor of the big corporate bigwigs. As for the first point with it, which is like security risks of peer-to-peer and everything, to a certain extent, that's always going to be present. If you ever decide to go peer-to-peer, there are massive risks. You can do something where it's heavily recommended you play with a VPN or you play with this or that. There's ways to deal with it, but I mean, it's the same thing with like old school games that had peer-to-peer stuff. It's always going to be a potential risk, but I would rather deal with that, turn on a VPN or something and play that way than lose the game I bought for $60 or $70 forever just because the developers decided it was time to move on, So, naming my son Cinnamon Rogers, it is a fantastic name, objectively. There is no debate. So, anyway, this whole thing is crazy. It's very wild to see, but yeah. I mean, you have games like 2K that kill your characters when the servers shut down, which is complete BS considering how much time and money go into those characters. I mean, again, the way there's so many things in this industry that we can point to and be upset about, but a lot of people just shrug it off because like, yeah, it's just how it is. And it's like, it doesn't have to be though. You can change it, He took my thing.